welcome to Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. My name is Joshua Bissell, and I'm the producer of this weekly podcast where we tackle topics of abuse prevention and vulnerable sector protection. This week, Melodie's finishing up our series on elder abuse prevention, and we're covering tips for caregivers and PSWs. Hopefully, this will be a great asset to you. If you're a caregiver or you know someone who works in the personal service industry, please pass this along to them. Maybe it'll be a blessing and an encouragement to them today. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Plan to Protect with Melodie Bissell, the safest podcast on the internet. We'll see you soon.
Thank you again for joining us for this podcast as we continue to focus on caring for the elderly. This is the fourth in the series on caring for the elderly. And today we are going to be talking about tips for caregivers, those that work directly with the elderly. The other day I went in to visit my mother-in-law, and as I've shared with you over the last few weeks, she lives in a long-term care facility. I'm an essential caregiver, and I go in and I take off some of the load from some of those that are caring for her every day. When I went in the other day, the caregivers, the nurses, and the PSWs told me that they had had a hard day with her. She was irritable, and she would snap at them, and she would push their hands away, and she would be quite bossy. Now, my mother-in-law is usually a very, very happy person. This is so out of character for her. But I know that a lot of individuals that have dementia and Alzheimer's are not always happy people, and they get easily frustrated. And I'm sure that you can understand when you can't think clearly, when you don't have memory, when you don't recognize people, it can be very difficult and challenging. And it's challenging for the elderly person, and it is also very challenging for their workers. This has been a really difficult 18 months for caregivers. Over the course of the last 18 months, as we've been living through COVID, those that are in long-term care facilities, that work in long-term care facilities, have had an extra burden of responsibility. Every time I go into the long-term care facility where my mother is, I have to go. I have to be tested for COVID. I have to wait 15 minutes. I have to gown up. I have to wear both a mask and a face shield, have my temperature taken. It is quite an ordeal. And I think about those that work in long-term care facilities and nursing homes that are trying to really protect the elderly from this contagious disease. What about those that have seniors and elderly people living in their home that are both looking after their own children, but they're also looking after their aging relatives? It has been a difficult 18 months. So today, as we look at some tips on how to protect yourself if you are caring for the elderly, I hope I can provide you both tips for protecting yourself, but also for your own well-being and health. The role and responsibility of caregivers is a heavy load. Not only are they often having to administer medication, they have to help with personal care needs, they have to help with dressing and bathing and providing social interaction, therapeutic activity. It is a challenging responsibility, but there are also many benefits and blessings that come along the way. When my mother-in-law is happy, she is so appreciative of every little thing I do. She's very complimentary, and she sings along with me, and she talks to me. She often will ask me the same questions over and over again, and we have good laughs together. But we know that for some of you, it is challenging. How should you deal with individuals that push you away, criticize you, are irritable and angry, or even hit at you? How should you deal with those kind of interactions? I hope the tips that I bring to you today give you new ideas on how to find care for yourself. Before you care for another person, you need to be able to care for yourself. First off, I'd like to really recommend that you know the policies and procedures that are in place. If you work for a long-term care facility or a hospital or a nursing home, or you work within an organization and part of your responsibility is to visit the elderly, I really encourage you to know the policies and procedures that the organization has put into place for your protection. That's not only for the protection of the elderly, but it's for your protection from wrongful allegations of abuse, injury, and harm. If your organization doesn't have policies and procedures, I would certainly ask them to provide you some. They should also be providing you training on an ongoing basis. Keep the conversation going. At least once a year, you should have training on how to interact and engage with the elderly and protect them from abuse, injury, and harm, and also to protect yourself. Consider yourself a professional. If you go into the hospital or you work in a long-term care facility, you know that before you end your shift, you have to chart, you have to write and journal anything that happened throughout the day, anything out of the ordinary. If you are not a professional, I still encourage that you take time to write thorough notes on what the individual ate, the medication that they took, any times that they were sleeping or doing exercise, if they lost their temper, got angry, irritable. Write down and journal the interaction that you had with them. Take immediate steps to relieve the stress and the burnout and the tension that you might feel. Make sure that you schedule vacation days and time off throughout the year so that you can find new energy and be able to face the task that you've been given. Stress is often a major contributor to elder abuse. So you want to make sure that you have balance in your life. Find activities that you do after work and on weekends or on days off where you can renew yourself, find rest, eat healthy, and be able to relieve some of that stress. So you don't take out your stress and your irritation on those that you are caring for. We also encourage you to work in tandem. Now, I know that most personal support workers, especially those that go into homes and nursing homes, you often work alone. One of my closest friends is a personal caregiver, and she sometimes spends long shifts, 12-hour shifts, caring for the elderly people that she works with. Not all of them are happy people. Some of them are very irritable and they get angry with her and snap at her. It is important after your shift to make sure that you get a good night's rest, get some exercise, eat healthy, and find ways to relieve that stress. But when you work with someone else, or even if you partner with someone else, to be able to talk about the interaction that you have with the elderly, you can find that you have things in common with other caregivers. If you do not have a team member that you can work with and take a break with throughout the day, make sure that you rely heavily on your family and friends. If you care for an elderly person in your home, you will need relief from your family and friends. Ask them to come over and relieve you so that you can either go shopping or go out for lunch or tea with a friend. There are often community support groups that can provide respite care. Even if it's only for a couple of hours, that break can do you a world of good. I know this has been challenging during COVID, so I encourage you to find someone who has a small bubble that can come over and join your family and help provide that relief that you desperately will need. Learn techniques to get your anger under control. Find support groups or community opportunities to take anger management courses or find ways healthy coping mechanisms. Healthy, I said, coping mechanisms to be able to deal with your anger. I know when my children were young, and I think it would even work with the elderly, is that there were times that I had to go and lock myself into a bedroom and get down on my knees, whisper a prayer, have a bath, take time, and have a break if I found that I was getting angry. You can do the same thing when you're caring for the elderly. Again, I can't stress the importance of getting a good night's sleep, eating healthy, getting some exercise, and just enjoying friends and family so that you can find comfort when you're irritable. There are many support groups for the elderly. I was just listening to a podcast by a local church in our community, and they were announcing that they were offering day camps for the seniors and the elderly. What a brilliant idea. We often think of day camps for children and young people. Yes, have a day camp for elderly. Invite them into your community. Invite them into your community center, your church, your school, and offer activities that the elderly will enjoy and that will provide support to family and caregivers. As I said, there are both healthy coping mechanisms and unhealthy coping mechanisms. Get help for substance abuse issues that you struggle with personally. It's never easy, but there are so many opportunities and plenty of action points that you can take to address either drug or alcohol abuses. Get professional help. If you find that you cannot get the anger issues and your irritation under control, reach out to a therapist. It's okay to get help when you desperately need it by talking to a therapist. I know when I go to visit my mother-in-law and she either snaps at me, pushes me away, tells me to go home, she doesn't want to see me, I have to remember not to take it personally. My mother-in-law is a singer. She has sang throughout her whole life. She was a professional singer and she would be invited in to be a guest singer at weddings, at church services, at different community events. She would often sing solos and she would sing in choirs. She recorded music. We used to tease that I had the musical name and she loved my name, Melodie, because she was very, very musical. I can hardly carry a tune, but we found recently one of her very old cassette tapes that she had recorded. Now, we often play music with my mother-in-law, and it's amazing as an Alzheimer patient how she can still sit down today and be able to pick up notes on the piano and play some of her favorite hymns. Before COVID, she knew all the hymns on the piano and could sing all of her favorite songs and tunes and hymns. Because she was shut in because of COVID for so many months, she lost so much of that. But when we found this old tape and we put it on our phone and were able to put it into an MP3, today when I go to visit my mother-in-law, we often don't talk, but we put the music on and she sings along. She doesn't even remember that it's her. But as she sings and belts out those songs and she joins me in singing them, I tell her, Mom, that's you singing. That's you singing years ago, almost 35 years ago. What joy that brings me. That helps me deal with the frustration of her not knowing me. It helps me not to take it personally when she snaps at me because I am looking at either photos in a photo album with her of a much happier time, or I'm listening to the words of the music that she's singing and remembering her at a much happier time. And it helps me find the patience and the tolerance and the love and the care that she so desperately needs today. Please note any behavioral changes that you see and recognize. Has a formerly talkative person, patient, become suddenly quiet and withdrawn? Has your normally pleasant client suddenly become defiant and angry? There could be a medical reason for such a change in behavior. It could also be an indicator of abuse. An alternative medicine or change in dosage could be all that's needed. But it's so important that you chart any behavioral changes that you see and share that information with their caregivers so that you're working as a team. Focus on documenting those changes in behavior, in attitude, and report any of your observations to your manager and to the family members. When you are at a healthy place yourself, you will be able to demonstrate empathy and not impatience. Arguing with a patient, especially an elderly person who is refusing to take a bath, complete an exercise, get into bed, eat a meal, will only escalate the tensions that you are experiencing and that they are experiencing. Rather than show your impatience, focus on communicating empathy and care, showing that you care for your client and what they are going through in a difficult time, and that you are willing to listen to their grievances. One of my very first jobs was working in a nursing home. And at the end of the day, after I had washed dishes, I must have only been about 15 or 16 years of age at the time, I would take a little trolley around with coffee, tea, and biscuits and books to read. The seniors would love when I come and knock on the door of their room, pour them a cup of tea, give them a biscuit, and either read to them or sing with them or ask them to tell me a story. If individuals do have cognitive capacity, I really encourage you to sit and listen to their stories. So often, the elderly feel ignored. They feel talked down to. They don't feel honored and respected. They will love to tell you stories about times in their life where they felt healthy, where they were agile, where they were active. So ask thought-provoking questions. See what you can do to help the patient or the client feel better. As you are straightforward with them and you show empathy and care to them, they will feel valued. When we first returned to the nursing home and became an essential caregiver for my mother-in-law, she was almost comatose. But because my husband and I now go in 4, 5, 6 times a week and spend anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours with her, we have seen her bounce back, sing with us, be able to sit down at the piano where she will ask us questions. She will tell us she loves us. And we have seen that we are good medicine for my mother-in-law. If you find it hard to be patient, you find that the care is more than you can handle, I want to encourage you to talk to family and friends about what you're facing. Don't bear it alone. Perhaps other family members will give you ideas and tips on how to provide the care that you need. I'm so grateful that the nursing home where my mother-in-law is was willing and eager to have us become essential caregivers. It just took us the courage to say, can we be approved to be essential caregivers and come and help feed her and care for her? So we really were able to take a load off the PSWs and the nursing staff on her floor. Then finally, as we come to a conclusion in this series and on today's podcast, there's two things that I want to say to you. One of those is know when to draw the line. There are times when we are emotionally spent, where we know that we're not in a healthy place, and we just need to walk away. No individual PSW or family member or friend or caregiver should be abused by a patient. Don't put yourself in that position that you are being abused. If you've tried every technique in the book, every technique that you can think of, and the solution continues to become toxic and dangerous to yourself, don't hesitate to report that to your supervisor and ask to be relieved of that duty. It's crucial for personal support workers to set and enforce boundaries with difficult patients. Your commitment to self-care is so essential for you to then be able to provide care to your patients and clients and family members. No one deserves to be abused and have to endure toxic environments. In order to serve others well, you need to prioritize your health and your wellness and your mental and physical well-being. As best as you can, let patients know what bothers you. I will often say to my mother-in-law, don't talk to me that way. Don't hit. Please take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And then finally, as we always say, whether you're working with children, youth, or vulnerable adults, make sure that you recognize and deal appropriately if someone is being abused. If you see indicators of abuse, if you hear allegations or disclosures of abuse, if the person has cognitive capacity, encourage them to report it to law enforcement. If the individual is in a long-term care facility, in a nursing home, make sure that you report that abuse. It is a legal duty to report abuse in long-term care facilities. If the person does not have cognitive capacity and you believe that someone is in need of protection, call 911 if you believe a crime is being committed so that they can appropriately investigate. Call senior safety lines. And again, in our show notes below, we will provide you phone numbers and contact numbers to reach out to if you believe a senior is being abused. Make sure that you report elder abuse in nursing homes. Don't be silent. Speak up for those that are oppressed. Again, if you are a supervisor, if you're a manager within a long-term care facility or a nursing home, or you're a PSW and you're interested in our services at Plan to Protect, please reach out to us. On our school at plantoprotectschool.com, we have an elder abuse awareness seminar. We have orientation and refresher training for those that work with the elderly to be able to recognize abuse, get a certificate demonstrating that you have received your annual training on elder abuse protection and the prevention of elder abuse. We're here to help you. We're able to come in and do on-site training, policy writing, and helping you achieve that high standard of protection for the elderly. Thanks so much for joining us for this series. We hope it's been helpful. If it has, please like this podcast. Please share it with others. And thank you so much for your care for the elderly. Take care. Bye-bye.